Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff Operations Officer, assisted the National Security Team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the Vice Commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
I want to know why AG Garland and the Justice Department are so quiet on this tonight. You know, they're out there labeling parents domestic terrorists, yet they're saying nothing about this. And these documents were so slow to come out. Human trafficking is a multi-billion-dollar business in this country, and Jeffrey Epstein is dead, and Ghislaine Maxwell is in prison for 20 years where she belongs. And if people in that report are still fighting to keep their names private, Sean, they have no legal basis to do so unless they're a child, a victim, or a cooperating defendant by some chance against some potential case against Ghislaine Maxwell. And I think Mark Garagos, as a great criminal defense attorney, will back that up as well.
You know, Mark.
Jeffrey Epstein, the rest of the story, folks. It's Whistleblower Wednesday again on the Rob Maness Show, and we're live on Worldview Tube. Our X Spaces simulcast, Rumble, YouTube, Truth Social, plus Amazon Fire and Roku. Well, years after his suspicious death while in federal custody, Jeffrey Epstein's reprehensible crimes continue.
We'll get this fixed in a second. This happened yesterday, too.
View of our society.
Sorry, guys.
The justice system and our national security. Come on. With the new Attorney General's promise to release the files and setting everyone up for high expectations but low information release, that only published known information, citizens are even more angry and suspicious than ever. And they should be. My guest today is Mike Dillon, and he's demanding the release of the entire list of Epstein's clients. Not just the flight logs or some empty redacted binder. He poses a critical question. Who are we protecting? Mike's the host of Maha with Mike on Lindell TV. He's got a unique and compelling personal connection to the rest of the story. Mike lived in the area where Palm Beach High School is located. The very school where Ghislaine Maxwell recruited girls to go to Jeffrey Epstein's mansion. Mike knew several of Epstein's victims who attended that high school, giving him a deeply personal perspective on the issue. Mr. Dillon believes that full transparency is essential, like we all do, and he warns that this could be very damaging to the Trump administration and the public eye if Maha Americans who came willingly into our coalition don't get the transparency that they were promised. Mike's also an inventor and founder of airwaterhealing.com. Mike Dillon, welcome to the Rob Maness Show.
Thank you so much for having me on. Absolutely. Thank you so much. And thank you for your service. Thank you for my freedom. Always got to give respect to veterans when there's ever an opportunity. I don't think that we should have just Veterans Day. I think it should be Veterans Year. I think every day we have way too many veterans who are homeless on the streets. And I'm hoping that's another part of the administration that becomes very transparent and that we get the funding that's getting sent over to Ukraine to some of our homeless veterans here that have some PTSD, guys who actually did go to war and did fight for our freedom and are very transparent. But yeah, the Epstein thing, it's been way too long.
Yeah, that Pam Bondi clip right there, I chose that on purpose because she's very aggressive in that clip, isn't she? But that's from 2024. That's not after she became the Attorney General. And I just wondered, what, from your perspective, what do you think we're seeing here from the AG's position post her swearing in? When you put all the binder thing and the way they rolled that out, her announcement of it, and then the last thing we heard was the FBI eventually did give her a truckload of boxes for the day that she demanded it after she fired the head of the New York FBI office and asked him to retire. What is your perspective on her at this point? Is it like mine is, hey, there's a lot going on. Most people haven't been even nominated yet, let alone confirmed. They're working with a skeleton crew, plus the number of resistance staffers from the last administration there. She's got a tough job.
There's a famous drug case that happened in upstate New York, and there was a bunch of criminals who were, could have possibly been wrongfully accused, or there could have been a cross-contamination, and they had found out that one of the people who's in charge of forensically testing the drugs, she had a fentanyl and a cocaine use, and they had found it in her desk at work where the facility was where they did the testing, and also in her car. So what happened was from like a 8 or 9 year period, all of the people that were indicated ended up getting retrials, and a lot of them were released because the information was so compromised that they weren't able to go back and prove that it wasn't untainted. And I think what we're seeing now is there's so much that they have found. I believe that there are so many politicians and people of high level power that have been indicated. And if you remember the comedian, right, who had shared his story about the day that he met Jeffrey Epstein, he said that he had brought him into a room and showed him like a whiteboard. And the whiteboard had so many markings of high power rifles and artillery shells that were being transferred. And he's like, I was just yesterday in this very room with defense contractors from Israel. And if that's not scary enough to think that he's sharing this with a comedian that he has no dirt on, can you imagine what these girls from Royal Palm Beach High School were being told? Like, let's not forget that he made billions and billions of dollars in transactions as an arms dealer. Right? He had contracts, and he was involved with people who had arms dealing contract. These aren't like your run of the mill, police officers and your low ranking military guys. These are people that control the fate of governments and whether or not somebody wins a war. You do not win wars without bullets and very powerful weapons. Yes, there are people on the inside that you can destroy it from within, right? The Trojan horse, if you can get in past the gate. But I think what's happening now is, Pam Bondi knew the American people were going to be disgusted when you walk out with 2 binders this size. You can't walk out with 2 binders this size. I could get 4 boxes in 2-bedroom apartments filled with the information that's just from the court remindings of redacted stuff that's already public information. So I think that there's going to be a place where not only are you going to have to save face immediately, but I'm at the point now where, Rob, we might have to launch a completely new investigation. That stuff might be so redacted and so tainted, we might have to go from the ground level. I mean, if you've seen those crime documentaries, you can go back to a crime scene from 30 years ago and get blood samples out of the drywall. You're going to tell me that forensically we can't track cell phones and go re-interview people and talk to the police officers and get the samples? None of the girls in Royal Palm Beach are willing to talk right now because they're so disgusted. I've reached out to a couple of them and said, I want you to come on my podcast just to share your story and see how you're doing. And, one of their publicists had reached out to me and said, Mike, they're afraid because nobody's being arrested. How can they speak if the person that they would speak about is walking freely? And some of them could very prominently be shown on television every day.
Yeah, you're exactly right, man. And speaking of the high school folks that you knew, from your perspective, what was it like to realize that you had crossed paths with these women or these what were girls then from your own high school when this information started coming out?
So let me ask you this, Rob. Did you go to public school growing up?
Mm-hmm. Sure did.
Okay. I remember when I got out of school, when I was riding my bike, if one of my buddies had a $10 bill in his pocket, we all had a $10 bill in our pocket. We would stop at the grocery store. We'd get some Arizona iced teas. We'd get a bag of chips, and we'd go sit over at the bleachers and watch the cheerleaders warming up for the football game. So when you get a girl in high school in the early 2000s that comes back to school and has crisp $400 bills in her pocket, everybody starts to know. When you show up and you've got a $275 designer bag from Worth Avenue, when you live out in Royal Palm Beach, not a lot of people made more than $30,000-$40,000 a year. So, and especially if it wasn't the captain of the cheerleading squad, and you had, Becky, who lived out in Crestwood, out in the middle of nowhere with a $125,000 house, and she starts showing up with stuff that you would see in a movie. People start asking questions, and the guys start asking, hey, you didn't go to that creepy guy's house out in Palm Beach, the one that's paying everybody to come out and do massages, did you? Oh, yeah. Well, it's really nothing. It's not that much, but I wanted to get a couple of my friends out there. Hey, I want one of those purses. What do I got to do to get that purse? So that's kind of where the red flag, for us. But, back in that day when you're 16, 17 years old, you're not thinking about the implications of, what this guy was actually doing. Now when I look back at it, there was a lot of girls that were shamed, right? They were being made fun of for, hey, man, you're going out there and you're basically a legal prostitute. But they were going and Rob, it was so deep that they were cross communicating in between schools. So we had girls that were driving up to Palm Beach Gardens and they were spreading the information there as well. Cardinal Newman, which is the Catholic school, which is off of Palm Beach Lakes. So there was multiple cross-contamination of this scheme. It was basically racketeering at the highest level. And it's because the other girls there were like, hey, I want to get in on a little bit of that. I'll never forget, I had heard it through one of my really good friends. One of the girls had got in trouble for smoking at school. And when they brought her in, they found like over $1,000 in cash in her backpack.
Wow.
And they thought that she was a drug dealer. And she broke down and was like, no, I recruited a couple girls to, go out there. And that's kind of where the shaming came in. They're like, you're basically a legal pimp.
Yeah. Were you hearing anything about Maxwell being around the school at all, or the schools, it sounds like, and the parents? When I would go home from school, if the parents had gotten wind of something, my mom was like in my face going, hey, Robbie, what do you know about this? Were you guys hearing about anything from the parent circles and those kind of things, or was it just contained within the students?
No, so there definitely, there was rumors of a girl, of a woman that was recruiting people, and she was, working within her power to bring in, people who weren't from affluent backgrounds. They were specifically going for the less popular girls. Let's go in there, and we don't want to cause a bunch of red flags. But I specifically remember when one of my really good friends, his mom had been talking about one of the girls that he knew, whose parents had called and was, snooping around and basically had called the Palm Beach Island, the police department that was down there, and said, hey, my good friend's daughter came back with a bunch of money from someone's house in Palm Beach. And, she was driven there because they didn't have a driver's license. So a driver had come and got them and said that, she had come back with some money and she wanted to investigate. And I remember she had said specifically that they were already aware of some activity. So the fact that, it was already known and it was aware, it draws so many conclusions looking back at it now, because how parents are, right? You come home with $10 and you're going to grill. Where'd you get that? Did you steal it from my wallet?
Oh, yeah.
But when you start coming home with nice things, and you start coming home with crisp $100 bills, and 2003, 2004, we didn't have OnlyFans, right? So these girls weren't making side hustle jobs. They weren't going out and selling feet pictures like they are now making it seem like this is harmless prostitution, which it's not. This is absolutely extortion. They're getting these girls to think that it's okay to sell their body. But if they don't start arresting some high profile people, I'm afraid that these women might never come out and share their story again because they're fearful.
Yeah, and can you blame them for being afraid? These are very powerful individuals, and I'm going to show a clip of the guy from the FBI office in New York walking out like an arrogant, going into the next segment. But we can't just be talking about New York, because this case really was down in Florida. The feds down in Florida, the U.S. Attorney's office down there, and the local prosecutors have some culpability here in how they dealt with this and how they let him off the hook with a sweetheart deal, and then everything all the way up until his death. So my guest today is Mike Dillon. He's the host of Maha with Mike on Lindell TV, an inventor, an author, and high school classmate from Royal Palm Beach High School, where some of these girls that Epstein trafficked were in his classes. We'll be right back on the Rob Maness Show.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. Is the government tracking you? Do they have access to all your data? Well, if you go to worldviewtalk.com, you'll find out about a cell phone company that, well, does not store your data. They don't do that. This is what they're known for. They don't store your data. You have privacy. You're not being tracked. That's why a lot of folks are turning to worldviewtalk.com. You'll find their prices are very competitive. All the details are there at worldviewtalk.com. Again, worldviewtalk.com. Oh, while you're there, not only do they have cell phones that aren't tracking you, you can find out about how to get a satellite phone. Should the whole system go down and you want to communicate with a family member or a loved one, you might want to have a satellite phone. Or how about their solar generators? They have great solar generators. Check them all out right now. Worldviewtalk.com, worldviewtalk.com.
An extraordinary scene outside of the New York FBI office in the last hour. Assistant Director in Charge, James Dennehy, who was forced to resign under pressure this week, left the building to cheers from hundreds of his colleagues and the sound of bagpipes. He was forced out after clashing with Donald Trump's Justice Department after the removal of senior FBI leaders and requests for the names of agents who worked on the January 6 cases. He told those gathered that he will be their, quote, best cheerleader on the outside. We'll be watching for that. Another break for us. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Whistleblower Wednesday, and we're talking to Mike Dillon, who was a classmate of a lot of these victims in high school that were recruited and trafficked by Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. And to get the perspective of someone that knows them, was in their age group, and understands the communication that might happen in a class, in a neighborhood, in a community, and that relationship with what was going on is pretty incredible. And Mike, we're honored that you would spend this time with us to talk through this, because I know you've given interviews before, but this perspective of being able to talk to somebody that knows them, but is also an advocate for them, and I say you are, because these victims need advocates. People tend to focus on jerks like that guy right there, Dennehy, who's arrogantly marching out of his office as he's leaving in disgrace, the FBI office in New York City there, that Bondi had to order them to send the rest of the evidence to her after she only got these binders and stuff. I really appreciate it. How do you feel knowing these young ladies and these women now, when you see the arrogance of people that are supposed to be looking out for them? I mean, they're the FBI and the DOJ, the prosecutors, they are the lawyers and the investigators for the victims. That's where their support's supposed to be coming from.
There was more coverage as soon as they started talking about the Epstein stuff, and it was almost like a light switch was flipped on, and they had they were screaming from the megaphone, right? And they were like, let's look at Zelensky and why he's not wearing a suit. That whole debacle just basically stopped the Epstein train dead in its tracks. They went right to talking about Zelensky and misappropriated funds, and Donald Trump didn't pay for Zelensky's hotel room while he was there, and now we're hearing about the apology letter. It doesn't take away from the fact that a lot of these people were campaigning on the fact that they were going to be transparent. We were finally going to get something to the bottom. I mean, you're talking about, this was 20 years ago, right? 15, 20 years in the making. And it just seems to me like he died in that cell and all of the secrets died with him because nobody else is willing to come out. Nobody else is wanting to be transparent. And we now know that they move people around when they don't want them to be talking. Do you think it's a coincidence that the same guy that was involved in the shootings out in Las Vegas ended up going out to Maui, was involved in the Maui fires? And, there was a bunch of people just broke yesterday that now somehow he was involved in the Diddy case. So, let me give me a second. His name is John Pelletier, right? John Pelletier. He pretended to be a local sheriff office after a woman named Ashley Parham claims that Diddy and others had violently gang raped her. Just happened to be in the right place at the right time, but yet he is also involved in two of the most prolific incidents between the Las Vegas shooting and the Maui fires. That guy sure as heck is around at the right time to get his name out there in the publicity, huh?
Yeah, it is. Look, I'm convinced that there are operations organizations inside our government, inside our intel agencies, and I don't say that lightly. You know my background. I served most of my adult life in the United States government in classified areas, highly classified jobs, including in combat, but a lot of classified areas, and have seen a lot of intelligence and been in charge of law enforcement organizations and investigations, those kind of things. So to have the same person or group of people pop up at various incidents without a seemingly official reason, you know what I mean, Mike? It just gives me pause, and I don't blame the American people for being highly suspicious. I mean, after all, the conspiracy theories that people have been yelled at by the so-called smart people and elites and official people and those kind of things over the last 10 years, especially since I left the Air Force, have always turned out to be right. Those conspiracy theories really weren't theories. They were actually grounded in fact. And that's what this is, too. You remember there was a conspiracy around, well, was Bill Clinton on the Lolita Express for years and years and years until those flight logs finally came out and proved it. And we were told, this is just a conspiracy theory, et cetera. That's why I brought up the Florida federal law enforcement and U.S. attorney offices. That's where this case originated at, was down in the Palm Beach office area at the federal level, if I remember correctly. And there should be a lot of files there, too, because Epstein was never put on trial anywhere. They shouldn't have transferred any of those files, except for that was what was related to Maxwell's case, where she was tried at. So there's a lot of questions here that we ought to be asking. We are asking it, but the people in charge just aren't asking them, at least not publicly anyway, and that's not very transparent.
And it also just goes even a step further. The more that you dig and you look into, Miss Maxwell's father, you look into Robert Maxwell, and, his publishing company was called Pergamon Press. And, Pergamon was mentioned in Revelations as where Satan's throne was. And if you dig deep into what his company tried to do, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they either merged with McGraw-Hill or they tried to outright purchase McGraw-Hill. And you've got a guy with some very outside questionable influence. What does he want to do with children's scholastic books? Why were they so vehement on, they were adamant, I meant to say. They were so adamant on getting control of the book supply here in the United States, and they wanted to acquire McGraw-Hill so they could just push their propaganda down our children's throats. And if you look at some of the questionable people that he had inside of his life, it's very apparent why they're dragging this out. And I believe it is because there is so much implication. We're going to have to reopen so much. If we find out that laws were passed illegally, if there were people that were put into jail because they needed to be, or people were let off because, same thing with the crime families, right? They get you in a very small misdemeanor, and the next thing you know, they bring you along with a robbery. Because once you're got no longer have a clean white slate, the criminal families, they want to have everybody. They've got some type of dirt on you, so you'll never rat them out.
Oh yeah, absolutely right. The dirt gathering, I think that was central to Jeffrey's operation. I think Ghislaine Maxwell was his handler, his intelligence agency handler, whatever agency or agencies. I believe it's more than one agencies that were allied with each other, not necessarily from the same country either, that were conducting this operation. And it's a honeypot operation combined with, yes, blackmail, but also It's an orchestrated capability to get into and control as many decision makers in our case, the United States government, as humanly possible from my perspective. And again, I don't say that lightly at all, but that's what it's certainly turning out to look like to me.
Yeah, and the more and more that you focus on, like you hit the nail right on the head earlier when you said conspiracy theories are starting to come out. They're all on top. It's something like 36-0 for the past like 15 years, and you think there's absolutely no way, and again, you look at what, our RFK, when you look at this whole entire Maha movement, when people try to look at it as a government movement, it is never going to succeed. The whole Maha movement really needs to be the people's movement. It needs to be the mom and the dads. It needs to be the transparency, not to take away from the victims of Epstein. But the whole thing is this movement, if we start to grow our circle, this is where you demand transparency, right? How many things at a local level can be done? Is it the mothers? Is it the victims? Is it the children's, mothers and fathers who are now victims because a father has to deal with that emotional baggage for the rest of his life, of the PTSD of his wife being raped by Jeffrey Epstein? Maybe they need to go outside the Palm Beach Police Department and start demanding people who are still working that were involved in that case, demanding resignations if they don't want to be transparent. I don't care if they signed an NDA. They need to go in and remove that DNA. If we can rename the Gulf of America or the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, then we can go in and rip up some old NDAs and start getting to the bottom. We really need to know the transparent truth and the whole truth. So that way something of this level scale could never happen. It can't happen again.
Yeah, because it's more than just the big names on the flight logs and the big names that were perpetrators and co-conspirators with Maxwell and Epstein, because the ones I'm concerned about are the lever pullers and decision makers that aren't famous. The Congress people, their staffs, the U.S. attorney's offices. We wouldn't even know about the Epstein case, the original one, if a guy named Mike Cernovic hadn't, through his attorney, gone in and got the stuff unsealed several years ago. That was at the Florida U.S. Attorney's Office or Deputy Assistant U.S. Attorney's Office, I believe. It's just we have to get all the way down to that depth of the organizations and even our society, because you mentioned the moms and dads. The moms and dads, were they ever brought into this and blackmailed and extorted? With things like, hey, your daughter, what she's been doing, here's the video of it, and we're going to publicize this if you talk. Did that happen? That's a pretty common way to do business with these kind of people in the drug world, where they're doing human trafficking and the prostitution world, from what I understand and what I've seen in my life supervising law enforcement and investigatory agencies during my Air Force career. So it's puzzling that there aren't more questions being asked at levels like the governor's level, the state attorney general's levels, and those kind of things, isn't it?
Well, and it also makes you think, and again, this is going back and, peeling back an onion, okay? If you remember, it was pretty big even before the documentary came out, but there was a documentary that had come out that was called "Are You Up?" And it was about a gentleman who started a revenge porn website, and they would hack into girls' phones through their Gmail account. They would get their personal photos. Most of them were either scantily dressed, or they were completely nude, or doing lewd acts. And they would post it on this website, and they would hashtag and the girls, and they would bribe them, and until parents got involved. There was one mom who fought till the end of the earth to be able to get the certain powerful groups involved. There was a group called Anonymous, and Anonymous was able to go in and take over his website. I think they even froze his bank assets, and they had wiped out his hard drives. So if they're able to do that, why hasn't Anonymous gotten involved? Why hasn't Anonymous got involved in something like the Epstein case, which is way bigger? Not to take away from those poor girls whose pictures were exposed online, but where's Anonymous? Where's these groups that are always coming to save the day? The Edward Snowden's, groupies, the people that are out there that know how to find the digital traces that can go back and, and again, AI is very scary. You go now, I could open up in my call center, I can get a list of everybody from 1992 that wore purple socks on a Thursday, right? There's so much information that's out there. Why are some of these big groups that have the technology to go in and trace? They could tell you every cell phone that came within 300 feet of Epstein's house. They could tell you ones that met there multiple times. They can tell you which people were at the courthouse the same day that they were at Jeffrey Epstein's house, and then they also visited a police department. So why is that information, not coming out for all of the Epstein, unless there's certain powers that do not want that information out there?
Well, there's definitely powers that don't want that information out there. We're going to talk some more about that in the national security part of this when we come back from this break, Mike, because I think it's important that we have honest discussions about this, even though I may not agree with every idea about this issue out there. But it certainly looks suspicious, and there are some facts that I agree with. And we'll be right back with Mike Dillon, who went to high school with some of the Epstein victims.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. I want to thank you for all your support at www.foundation.com that helps make possible pushing out 24/7 content for free. Without your support, we'd have to put it all behind a paywall. But thanks to you and your support through our foundation, we're able to push it out for free as a broadcast service and broadcast ministry of WVW Foundation. Please consider going there and setting up an automatic monthly contribution, or go there and make an occasional contribution. If you prefer to support us through the mail, you'll find our mailing address there at wvwfoundation.com. You can also call and make your contribution over the phone by calling 901-825-0652. That's 901-825-0652. Again, all these details are available at wvwfoundation.com. Thank you for your support as we try to help people around the world understand the times through the lens of a Christian worldview.
Some people don't understand the need to redact. In the case of a victim, that should be pretty obvious to people. What are the other things that maybe you would have to redact?
Well,
national security?
No, of course, national security, some grand jury information, which is always going to be confidential, but we'll see. Let's look through them as fast as we can, get it out to the American people, because the American people have a right to know, not only on that, but on Kennedy, on Martin Luther King, on all of these cases that the Biden administration has just sat on for all these years. So yeah, it's really, it's not sad, it's infuriating that these people thought that they could sit on this information, but they can't. It's a new day, and we believe in transparency, and it's going to come out. And when we redact things, Sean, what we're going to do is not just pull pages out like they used to do. If something's redacted, you will know the line, and you will know why it's
redacted for national security reasons. A.G. Bondi there is talking about the Epstein information. So my guest today is Mike Dillon. He was a high school classmates with some of the young ladies that were victims of the Epstein trafficking ring and operation. And Mike, I've got a lot of military experience, but I have to ask you, somebody that knows these young ladies, has that perspective. When you hear, well, we've got to redact information for national security reasons out of those files and that paperwork, what are you hearing? What's that saying to you?
There were some very powerful people that were guilty of something or lots of things, right? There's no way that Jeffrey Epstein had access to missile launch codes. There was no secret foreign entity information. I think it has a lot to do with the banking cartels. I think it has to do with some very prominent people that possibly were able to make those high clarity decisions, right? You mentioned earlier in the segment that people said it was a conspiracy that Bill Clinton would ever have his name on that flight log, and then yet you find out he was there multiple times. And I am not saying that everybody that was on those flights is guilty of committing, pedophilia and certain types of crimes, but when you know who somebody is and you have a long-standing history of knowing what that guy was, there is a very good chance that a lot of the people were blackmailed. And if you have blackmail on people of very, very powerful positions, that could definitely be a security issue. If we come to find out that, maybe what if the head of one of our intelligence informations had gone down there? What if he was invited? What if he flew down there with Bill Clinton? To me, what happened in Palm Beach was nothing compared to what happened with the people that got on that Lolita Express.
Yeah, and even people that went to see him at his apartment. It's my understanding that Ehud Barak, a very high Israeli leader, went to Epstein's apartment, over 30 times or so? And, if that's not an interesting and more than suspicious set of occurrences, then nothing is, isn't it?
Yeah, and also the jet companies, right? So if you go back and you check the Lolita Express, all of those informations, they redacted a lot of the companies that rented the plane out. So even though it was Jeffrey Epstein's plane, or supposedly it was his plane, who knows how many LLCs and S corps were hidden. But when you go and those companies' names that rented out the plane were already redacted. Why is that something that needs to be redacted? A corporation that rented and borrowed his plane. Why can't we know what that company was?
Yeah, is there a national security reason for it? I mean, the victims, like Hannity was saying, I totally understand the victims' information being redacted. They're the ones that need to be protected in the information flow. They need to be protected from outside people being able to get to them and harass them. Their lives are, I'm sure, not what they would have been had they not been involved in this. I'm sure there's PTSD is rampant, and their marriages are tough if they are even able to get married. It's tough to be a parent having lived through that. I mean, we know all of the consequences that happens to these victims. But national security reasons for the aircraft companies, that's crazy. There's no national security reason for that unless it was a military aircraft or a U.S. government aircraft from another U.S. government agency or an intelligence agency from another country. And that's not unusual to have unmarked civilian-looking airplanes being operated by U.S. government agencies that are both what we call white intel and black intel, or black operation, the hidden world, and those kind of things. But there's no indication of that, is there?
Well, it depends on how far people are willing to dig. I find another thing that's really kind of, mysterious, when you start talking about things that are mysterious. Rob, what about his wealth? What about Jeffrey Epstein's wealth? Acquiring private jets and private islands, and a lot of the money just kind of appears mysteriously, and the transfers of some of that money coming in, some of that stuff has now been redacted. Right. So there's people that were sharing clips that I had seen of bank statements where there was large sums of money that were getting transferred, and the person that was transferring it was redacted. Why can't we know where his money was coming from? You get that kind of wealth. Who's funding it? Who's funding all of this, debauchery? Was it a foreign power? Was it another bank? If the money's moving through multiple banks, that usually means that it's probably coming from another part of the world, right? You're not going from Citibank to Wells Fargo when you got to start moving money from islands.
Yeah. And, personally, I think it's some type of intelligence operation operated by a nation state or two. I think more than one, honestly. Large sums of money can come out of nation state government type operations, because there's all kinds of places to be able to hide expenditure and those kind of things. And the reason why I believe that is when I look at Epstein, I can't figure out how he became a gazillionaire and was able to buy islands and airplanes and travel the world all the time and those kind of things and have mansions in Palm Beach, et cetera. Can you?
No, and that's what I said. You know, the mysterious thing is who was funding this man, and what did they want? What was their ultimate goal? You know, to have that kind of untapped resources means that you're anticipating on getting that money back at least tenfold, or favors that are worth that amount of money.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of trading. I think that goes on. You know, hey, I'll set you up with a house here in the south of France if you'll do X for me, or can transfer X number of dollars to so and so, and those kind of things. And there's usually several layers of it, several branches and sequels, what we call branches and sequels of it, to help hide those from what I understand is going on. So do you think, knowing what we know now, do you think these high-profile folks like Clinton, Prince Andrew knew what Epstein was doing? Do you think they thought these girls were underage? What do you think, from your perspective, having gone to high school with some of them at the time? You think they knew?
There's no way that they didn't know. They knew what was happening. They knew what they were getting in. I think it's all been laid out there before. And again, I'm not an independent journalist at the time. I was a high school student. You know, I tell people, if you really want to dig deep, you know, and shout out to Ian Carroll. Ian Carroll went on Joe Rogan, and he had put a lot of research and paid a lot of people to go out and dig out and find, you know, a lot of these connections. I don't think that you fly to that island knowing the amount of, you know, people that have already kind of exposed him and the connections that he had. There's no more coincidences, right? It's just uncovering the cover up.
Yeah. And you know, like, the law enforcement goes out to the island and they're carrying out boxes and boxes of DVDs, audio tapes,
hard drives,
those kind of hard drives. Where are they? Where are those? Those are hard to destroy. You know, I mean, you could do it, but it takes some effort. And what happened to the contents of it? Were the videos uploaded onto another hard drive somewhere in the government, in the classified world? How do we get to that? You know, that's where Kash Patel, I think, is going to be important, because most of the FBI's case data is in classified or highly sensitive systems, like I think Sentinel is the main one they use, but there are others, just like there are other levels in the military classification system of different levels of top secret, different levels secret, confidential information, compartmented information. There are a lot of doors that have to be opened up and looked into in order to do this. And I'm just concerned because we're not hearing about, you don't have to hear about the information itself right away, but you should be hearing about search warrants being executed, especially or searches that are authorized without a search warrant internally to the government. You know, as a commander, I had the authority to sign off on searches if I had enough information to think that something nefarious was going on. So there wouldn't necessarily be a public search warrant, but you would think that people like Kash Patel and Pam Bondi working for Donald Trump, who said we are the most transparent administration ever in the history of the country. They say it all the time. You would think that they would want to at least talk about these activities and how they relate to especially this Epstein case, because honestly, people are really pissed off about this. And this binder thing just popped it open again and made them even more angry. And I don't blame people for being angry about this. We've got to take our last break, Mike. When we come back, we'll have a little clip from Alina Habba talking about criminal prosecutions just within the last 24 hours, I think, is where this clip came from. And I want to get your perspective on what types of prosecutions ought to be happening, what we should be reasonably expecting out of this, considering the population of people we're talking about. I'll tell you what I'm expecting. They need to be investigated, indicted, charged, taken to court, proven guilty, and then put under the jail in the prison after they're proven guilty. We'll be right back with Mike Dillon of Maha with Mike on Lindell TV.
And we know that only one person so far has actually gone to prison over that whole scandal. It was Ghislaine Maxwell, the former lover of Jeffrey Epstein. No man so far has actually been put in prison as a result of what happened. Do you think by releasing information from these files, we are likely to see criminal actions being taken?
Absolutely.
Really?
I think it would be negligent for us not to. You have to hold individuals who are indeed rapists accountable. We have to have them tried, in my opinion. And I do believe in that. You know, nobody should be just dismissed. You have to have your time in court and your case will be heard. But to hide lists, to protect political friends, all of that, we don't have time for that.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Whistleblower Wednesday. My guest today is Mike Dillon, who was a high school classmate of some of the victims of Jeffrey Epstein. And, you know, he's asking for what we're all asking for, and that's the release of all the information on the perpetrators that are in this data that we know at least a large part of it is still available. It hasn't been destroyed. Ms. Bondi said she did eventually get a truckload of boxes stacked to the ceiling of a box truck. We don't know how much more she got, but there's been nothing heard really about that until this clip from Alina Habba, who is a counselor to the president and in the White House staff, saying that there have to be prosecutions on this. And I like the way she characterized it. They're rapists. They're child rapists. There has to be prosecutions, right, Mike?
Not only does there have to be prosecutions, but, you know, I think the thing that I find most alarming, and I don't know if you dug into it at all, is, you know, why was there such a lack of civil suits, right? Because the amount of information that's required in a civil suit is so much different than what's available in a criminal suit, right? So we understand how prosecutors work and how much meat there needs to be for a prosecutor to really get involved. I want to know what kind of fear was struck into these girls' eyes that they couldn't, you know, go forth through a civil trial, you know, and the amount of people that were recruited, you know, I believe it's horse manure when they say that it was only 12 or 15 girls from Royal Palm. There was 2 or 3 girls that had recruited 10 to 15 on their own, right? Just from what we know from the inside. So the number was made way less than what it really was. And if you go and look it up, there's only a couple civil suits that you're even able to file, that you're able to even find. And I believe the one that was filed, like in 2018, it was settled. I think it was settled out of court. I just kind of stopped dead in its tracks. But how fearful were these girls that they didn't even file a civil suit against him for the wrongdoings?
Yeah, it could be that. That could be extortion on the parents, too, like we talked about earlier. It could also be a system set up like what Congress uses, where they hide it and they use a fund to pay off
people, and they hide it in the bowels of the super sensitive, secret meetings and those kind of things. They've been pretty successful at keeping that hidden quite a bit in Congress. People talk about it all the time. Well, we got some hands up over in the audience. Let's take some questions before we get to the end of the show. Go ahead, Rob.
All right, Colonel, we have Wib. Go ahead, Wib.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Colonel. Thank you, Michael. I would really like to know, I'm not very familiar with what the relationship with the governor of the U.S. Virgin Islands is, but it's quite clear she knew what was going on, and there was some sort of financial arrangement that she would look the other way. You can't have so many people calling that island Pedophile Island or whatever it was called without authorities knowing about it.
Yeah, I don't know what your take is on that, Mike, but Wib's got a point there. I mean, it's very difficult for a realistic person, a normal person, to think that the authorities out there weren't involved at all, and it's obvious based on some statements that we've heard that she did know about it.
That's definitely, and it's a lot easier when you get into those government, because there's less chain of command. It's probably easier to buy somebody off, when you start dealing with those countries, and half of it, changes when you're talking about what's happening in between, when you're getting into international waters and, very gray, but that you bring up a great question. Yeah, there's no way that, because that in that area, I don't know if you've ever been to the Caribbean, but they're a prideful people. They're very prideful. And for them to, be bought or to have somebody bought off, I want to know where she's at to this day. Has anybody taken her information? Did she hear? Were there house guests? That's another thing is were there other people from other countries? Were there people that were to that island that we don't even know about, right? Like how naive would we be to think that it was just girls getting flown in and from here from the U.S. and you're going to think that they weren't bringing girls in from the Bahamas and from the Southern Caribbean, that there wasn't other, how far down does it go? And of course, she would probably be the best person to get a true story from, hey, what were they paying? What kind of stories were you hearing? Were you being told to look the other way purposely? It's a great point you got there, Webb.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up too about the girls and people from other countries. We know Prince Andrew was there, obviously, but this has to be a worldwide network because there are sex trafficking networks in many countries, especially one that I talk about a lot these days, Ukraine. The country of Ukraine, as corrupt it is a huge human trafficking operation going on out of there, and a lot of our politicians were highly connected with Ukraine. So it wouldn't surprise me if there's that kind of connectivity too. Well, we got some more questions. Let's go ahead and take some from the audience. Who's next, Rob?
All right, Colonel, we have Jack Spratt.
Good afternoon, everybody. My take on all this is that evidently we had some people working in national security, sensitive things that could be trusted with our national security, but could not be trusted with children. To me, I'm a simple guy. That's my train of thought.
Jack, do you have a question for the guest?
That's just my take on it. There's obviously very big people on this list, and I wonder if those very big people are the ones that's going to be redacted. It would be like throw the small fish out there, the unredacted, to let them get devoured. But the big ones, a former president possibly, who knows how deep the tentacles go. That's just my thinking on it.
All right, Jack. Why don't we have the colonel and the guest answer the question?
Yeah, thanks.
Go ahead.
Look, the person that I demand to see held accountable criminally the most is President Bill Clinton, Mike. As a former commander in the United States military, he was the commander in chief, and he chose to
wield his power over a lowly intern who was under his chain of command and employee. And I'd still be in prison if I had done that with a young woman like that. And she wasn't a teenager at the time, but she was almost a teenager. So we know he liked them. He likes his women very, very young, and it wouldn't surprise me. I don't think that ought to be redacted. There's no national security reason for it. And I've worked at that level before in the classified world.
I'm going to agree. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. We've got some more questions and we got a few minutes left. Let's go ahead and take some more.
All right, Colonel, we have Coltrane.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I just want to thank, I'm seeing a lot of people in here with prior military experience. So I just want to tip my hat and thank everybody here for their service for the country. I guess my question is it too soon to start questioning Pam Bondi's integrity? I just feel like it's a smokescreen partially, and I also recognize that it's soon, right? It's early. However, when she makes statements about not disclosing information due to national security, it's just, I feel like it's a dog and pony show that they've used for decades now with the American people and with the world, just to hide, corruption, really. Or at least that's how it makes me feel. I think the world is ready to heal from this, and I think the people just need the truth. So I guess my question to you is, do you think it's a little too soon to question Pam Bondi's integrity, or should we just sit back and see how this plays out?
I've already talked about that. What about you, Mike?
I mean, yeah, it brings me back to, I think something surfaced about Pam Bondi in 2013, 2012. I think she got a $25,000 donation from Jeffrey Epstein. I'm pretty sure that that's public information, but I believe that these were questions that were probably already asked before you get into that point. If you look at how Kash Patel, what he went through, and what they threw at him to get him into the place, I think that, yes, they're going to tell the public, we're going to come out and we're going to release this. I honestly do believe, and I pray that I'm wrong, I do not think that the Epstein files are ever going to be released the way that they need to be. And I think it's because the corruption, like your first guest said, or maybe it was the gentleman that we just had on, he said that, the web, the tentacles, how deep they go into the fabric of society. I don't know if there is enough buckets to collect the eyeballs that will bug out of the skull plates when we find out how many people were actually implicated in this scheme.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's, just to add one thing about the redacted and the national security stuff, they're going to try it. You may hear something like, well, there's a revelation of a intelligence source there that needs to be redacted. Well, my question is, okay, if there's an intel source involved in this child sex trafficking operation that's at the highest levels of government around the world, okay, and spread all the way around the world by Epstein and Maxwell, then why are they letting it go on? And that's my question. That's why I don't want to see those kinds of redactions for national security reasons, because it's not a normal situation. Normally, we try to keep intelligence sources and methods from being revealed. But if we are allowing those types of things to happen in order to gain intelligence, then we are doing the wrong thing. Don't you think, Mike?
100%. 100%. It's done in against everything that this country was founded on, and it's absolutely appalling, and it needs to be stopped.
Well, we got about a minute left, my friend. Thank you so much for coming on. Tell us about your company real quick, and let folks know where they can go to find your products and those kind of things.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays on Rumble, they can find me, Maha Mike. We're on the Lindell TV network, and, Mr. Lindell's one of those people where he wants us to be very transparent and truthful, but he doesn't shy away from his religion. I proudly wear, our apparel company that we started specifically to help victims of child sex trafficking or rehabilitating those who have been trafficked. If you go to airwaterhealing.com, we actually have an apparel section. And yes, it is faith-based. So, you guys don't have to buy the faith-based shirts. We've got some really cool shirts that are on there. But we do give a percentage. They can find me on Twitter, Airwater Healing, Instagram, Maha with Mike. And definitely, I always reach out. If you guys have any questions about health, wellness, or detox, you send me a DM, and we always answer almost immediately, unless I'm having dinner with the old lady.
All right. Thanks, Mike. We appreciate it. Well, I'm very excited about the Maha movement. I saw the beef tallows coming back to Steak and Shake, and I want to see every fast food restaurant and every restaurant get away from seed oils and back to those types of natural fats and those kind of things. It's just more healthy for us. So we got to all work on it and work at it. The government's not going to have a solution for that. My guest tomorrow is John Thayer, and we will be having another discussion from a different perspective about human trafficking. This time, the hundreds of thousands of kids that are missing still, and adults too, in this vast network that's inside the United States and fed from our borders. I'll see you then on the Rob Maness Show.
You're watching Worldview 2, built on the 35 years of Worldview books, documentaries, research, high-profile interviews.
All right, everybody, that wraps up the
broadcasts of Brannon House. You're watching Worldview 2, built on the 35 years of Worldview books, documentaries, research, high-profile interviews, and the radio and television broadcasts of Brannon House.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to Slingshot TV. I'm your host, Troy Smith. Well, Slingshot News exclusively confirmed in a recent report that a man was arrested at the Capitol building for the possession of a firearm which he attempted to carry into President Donald Trump's joint congressional address on the night of March 4th, 2025. This incident, which the Capitol Police have recorded on their website, which lists all arrests on the Capitol grounds, has largely gone unreported by major news outlets. Slingshot News has also obtained information from exclusive sources, both former and current members of Capitol Police, that reveal a troubling pattern of unprecedented security failures that have endangered the president's life on both occasions he has appeared in the Capitol building during his presidency. Tariq Johnson, a former Capitol officer who resigned his post after the events of January 6, 2021, while speaking to Slingshot News, confirmed that multiple current Capitol Police officers have sounded the alarm over the apparent failure in security that occurred on March 4th during the president's remarks on Capitol Hill. The report by Capitol Police describes the event as follows. The suspect reportedly places a backpack through the X-ray screening post in a House office building ADA door. Officers at that door then reportedly discovered a handbag on the X-ray monitor, or a handgun on the X-ray monitor. Upon their discovery, the officers allegedly detained the suspect and conducted a physical search of the backpack and discovered a handgun with a 15-round capacity magazine loaded with 13 rounds of ammunition. The suspect was then placed under arrest and transported to headquarters for processing. CSS responded to process the scene, and CIS was notified and conducted an inquiry with MPD, Gun Registration Unit, which revealed the suspect has an active concealed carry license for the District of Columbia, and the firearm has a valid registration. So ultimately, the scene painted by Capitol Police within their report on the incident sounds troubling, but affirms that Capitol Police effectively did their duties of protecting the president on March 4th. The Capitol Police are one of the rare entities entrusted with protecting the president of the United States at any given point, as the Secret Service yields to the Capitol Police when the president is on Capitol grounds. Unlike many other government agencies, members of the Capitol Police are not protected by traditional whistleblower protections afforded to nearly every other federal employee. These laws, essential to reforming corruption and rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse committed in various government departments, often prevent Capitol Police officers from speaking out against injustices they witness while on duty. That's why Tariq Johnson, a former Capitol Police officer who resigned after the events of January 6, 2021, has become such an important figure in the effort to expose glaring security failures at the United States Capitol. Events, the former lieutenant told Slingshot News, have increased tremendously in their frequency since Thomas Manger became chief of the Capitol Police in July of 2021. Sources within the Capitol Police apparatus have confirmed to former Lieutenant Tariq Johnson that the same individual arrested with a firearm and high-capacity magazine during President Donald Trump's joint congressional address was able to carry a firearm, presumably the same firearm, into the inauguration of President Donald Trump. It is suspected that the individual who carried this weapon into both of Trump's speeches at the Capitol is a congressional staffer for a Republican member of Congress, and most likely former or current law enforcement. Still, Johnson assured Slingshot News that nobody is allowed to carry a gun near the president other than Capitol Police or Secret Service. Any member of either Capitol Police or Secret Service that is authorized to carry a gun around the President of the United States receives a LE, or law enforcement badge, that allows them to continue to carry their firearm near the Commander-in-Chief. Johnson assured Slingshot News that the individual arrested at the Capitol on March 4th was not authorized to carry the firearm that he had anywhere near the president, and did so anyway during the inauguration, which was held in the Capitol Rotunda for security purposes. The former Capitol officer revealed to our outlet that the individual arrested on March 4th was allowed to bypass security measures during the inauguration at the direction of Ashton Benedict, the Assistant Chief for Standards and Training Operations for the Capitol Police. Benedict was appointed to his current position in 2023 by Capitol Police Chief Thomas Manger, who Johnson told Slingshot News is the most politically biased chief of Capitol Police that he and the fellow officers he used to work with have ever seen. Manger has made a number of statements against President Donald Trump in the past, particularly recently, after the president pardoned some 1,500 individuals for the events of January 6, 2021. One of the more troubling aspects of the security failure that occurred on Inauguration Day, January 20th, 2025, outlined by Tariq Johnson, is that Capitol Police Chief Thomas Manger has a storied history of criticizing President Donald Trump. We never had security breaches of this magnitude with other chiefs who weren't as outwardly political, Johnson told Slingshot News. When asked if he could recall any incident similar to the lapse in security that occurred on Inauguration Day, Johnson's answer was simple: never. A thorough investigation into Manger's past comments did reveal that he has routinely criticized President Donald Trump, most recently just 1 month ago, over a choice by the president to pardon those for the events of January 6th. In a separate interview that Major granted to MSNBC, just days before the January 6th committee was set to commence under Nancy Pelosi's control of the House of Representatives, Major claimed the sole reason he exited retirement was January 6th. Adding to the validity of Johnson and other officers' claims that Capitol Police Chief Thomas Major is conducting the duties of his office with a political bent, Slingshot News has also discovered and can exclusively confirm that Thomas Major's wife is a Democrat politician in Maryland. Jacqueline Major is a managing director at the Ed Snyder Center for Enterprise and Markets faculty. She also unsuccessfully ran for county council in Montgomery County, Maryland in 2022 as a Democrat. Capitol Police Chief Thomas Major has even appeared in photographs on his wife's campaign Facebook page. In one post, Major claims that her husband is by her side at every step of her campaign. We see that on the screen now. And while conducting an investigation of the campaign finance database for information on donors to the Jacqueline Major campaign for county council, Slingshot News discovered a company by the name of Major Group LLC. Now, Major Group LLC is described online as an organization that consults and provides training programs in police leadership and management issues, including executive development, crisis communication, and community policing and trust building. From 2019 to 2020, Major Group LLC was a registered lobbyist in Washington, D.C. for the Major City Chiefs Association. An investigation into the Major City Chiefs Association by Slingshot News revealed that their largest sponsors include many military defense contractors that enjoyed tremendous benefits under the previous Democrat administration. Major's company lobbied for a group funded by L3 Harris, who received over $2.3 billion from Democrat President Joe Biden. L3 Harris, for one, is a four-star sponsor of the outfit that Major was a registered lobbyist for. President Joe Biden's military handed L3 Harris nearly $2 billion just in 2024 based on two contracts they were awarded. One contract in June of 2024 contracted Harris to supply M762A1 and M767A1 electronic time fuses over a 5-year period. That deal is worth up to $871 million. Another contract signed in the final months of the Biden administration was awarded from the U.S. Navy, valued at up to $999 million for multifunctional information distribution system joint tactical radio system terminals over 5 years. Finally, in a deal that was formally announced by Trump's chief political opposition in the Senate, Democrat Senator from New York Chuck Schumer, just days after Trump was sworn into office, L3 Harris was awarded a $300 million order for thousands of HMS radios. Also among the largest funders of the Major City Chiefs Association is an American defense contractor that largely produces drone technology called Skydio. During the conflicts that arose during his term in both Israel and Ukraine, President Joe Biden and his administration used Skydio, a Utah-based defense company, to manufacture the drones. Following the start of the war in Israel on October 7th, 2023, Skydio delivered over 100 drones to the IDF. The Biden administration awarded Skydio a production agreement for the U.S. Army's SRR program Tranche 1 with an initial value of $20.2 million and potential total of $99.8 million over 5 years in February of 2022. The company is a top-tier sponsor of the Major Chiefs Association, making the cut of capstone sponsor, an elite tier reserved for the top contributors to the organization. So when combining the failures of security upon the president's arrival, not once, but twice, with the fact that Capitol Police Chief Thomas Manger's company lobbied for a company that was lobbied for a group that was propped up by defense contractors who profited in the billions of dollars from the last Democrat president. You know, it's a highly questionable situation. The fact that Manger's wife is also a prominent Democrat politician in the state of Maryland raises even more questions. Why was a man unvetted and unchecked allowed to bypass security on Inauguration Day with a firearm? More importantly, why did it take until the next time the president entered the Capitol building and the individual tried to enter the building for a second time with the firearm for him to be apprehended? Tariq Johnson, our source in this story, assured Slingshot News that the Capitol officers are asking the same exact questions as serious doubts about the competency of leadership continue to grow. It is my honor to announce to you folks that just 24 hours after we published this report, no less than 24 hours after we published this report, we got news that U.S. Capitol Police Chief Thomas Manger has resigned. And on top of that, I received note from Tariq Johnson that this story was largely responsible for his decision to retire. The fact that he was a lobbyist, had lied about that in interviews, had lied about his past, was too much for him to handle, and he has decided to step down from his position. This is the importance of journalism, folks. This is the importance of Slingshot News, because without our ability to break the news here, to get into stories in depth, this individual who allowed for a gun to be present at the inauguration, endangering the life of President Trump, would still be in his position of power. But thanks to our due diligence and thanks to the heroic actions of Tariq Johnson and others, Thomas Manger is going to be leaving his post, and President Trump is safe once again. This is just a small example of what we can accomplish here at Slingshot News. It's a small example of how we hold people in power accountable for failures that endanger our country. Without you folks, this would have never been possible. I want to thank everybody out there who shared this story around, who made this possible to move forward and to expose this individual for the dangerous lapse in security that occurred against our president, not just once, but twice. Doing this investigation, digging into this individual, I can safely say that I was really worried about his power in Washington, D.C. And to know that our report, my investigation, had a lot to do with the fact that this man decided to call it quits, to walk away just hours after we released our report. It's everything that we started Slingshot News to accomplish. It's everything that we set out to do when we created this outlet. Not a Republican slant, not a Democrat slant, not an independent slant, but a dedication to truth, a dedication to exposing the truth no matter who it implicates. I want to give a shout out to Roger Stone, my dear friend, who I must say has been like a close family member to me through my journey throughout this media world. Roger is somebody who has given me opportunity after opportunity in my career to expose the truth and to use his platform to do it. And I was lucky enough to get the opportunity to go on Roger's show on 77 WABC this week to talk about that bombshell article. And I believe our push, coupled with Tariq Johnson and also Roger Stone's willingness to have us on the show and discuss this breaking issue that we discovered, it was a team effort that we put it all together. And because of it, the president is safer. And I can't tell you, I'm not one for credit, but I'm so thankful to Tariq Johnson, Roger Stone, and all of you out there who shared the story, made it possible, and blew it up, because we need to get this kind of information out there. There's a lot of people out there who want to harm our president. They want to harm our country, and we can't allow them to do that. So, folks, wherever you're watching, if you're watching on Rumble, if you're watching on TikTok, if you're watching on X, where most of you are probably watching this, I want you to follow, I want you to leave a like, and I want you to leave a comment and tell us how you're enjoying the show. because we put these shows together every week, folks. We do 4 or 5 of these a week, always, and it's a great time that we have here on the show, exposing the truth, getting into the news. We have a lot more to get into, so don't go anywhere, but we're going to go to a quick commercial break. When we come back, is Elon Musk going to cut Social Security? We're hearing a lot about it, but we've done some digging here, and we have a shocking report on that subject when we return from these commercial messages.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. I want to thank you for all your support at www.foundation.com that helps make possible pushing out 24/7 content for free. Without your support, we'd have to put it all behind a paywall. But thanks to you and your support through our foundation, we're able to push it out for free as a broadcast service and broadcast ministry of WVW Foundation. Please consider going there and setting up an automatic monthly contribution, or go there and make an occasional contribution. If you prefer to support us through the mail, you'll find our mailing address there at wvwfoundation.com. You can also call and make your contribution over the phone by calling 901-825-0652. That's 901-825-0652. Again, all these details are available at wvwfoundation.com. Thank you for your support as we try to help people around the world understand the times through the lens of a Christian worldview. Hello, I'm Brandon House. Is the government tracking you? Do they have access to all your data? Well, if you go to worldviewtalk.com, you'll find out about a cell phone company that, well, does not store your data. They don't do that. This is what they're known for. They don't store your data. You have privacy. You're not being tracked. That's why a lot of folks are turning to worldviewtalk.com. You'll find their prices are very competitive. All the details are there at worldviewtalk.com. Again, worldviewtalk.com. Oh, while you're there, not only do they have cell phones that aren't tracking you, you can find out about how to get a satellite phone. Should the whole system go down and you want to communicate with a family member or a loved one, you might want to have a satellite phone. Or how about their solar generators? They have great solar generators. Check them all out right now. Worldviewtalk.com, worldviewtalk.com.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Slingshot News. I am your host, Troy Smith. Well, is Elon Musk going to cut Social Security? Well, if you pay any attention to the Associated Press, that's what you're going to believe. The AP ran this headline last Monday. Musk eyes Social Security and benefit programs for cuts while claiming widespread fraud. So to anybody who's ever passed high school, this is a ridiculous and uneducated headline. First, Musk does not have the authority to cut Social Security or to cut Medicare or to cut any other entitlement program. President Trump can't cut entitlements either. Only Congress can make cuts to an entitlement program or add to the budget. We assume the Associated Press knows this and even knows that the Constitution requires any changes to the budget start in the House of Representatives. So it's a big lie for AP, which ironically claims to be independent, fact-based journalism. But as we all know, AP is just one part of a mainstream media that has spent much of the last 10 years twisting things to make President Trump look bad at any cost. The media writes articles that flat out lie, knowing that most people's attention spans